Well, good afternoon, everybody, and we're thrilled to welcome you to this episode of Automation Hour. We're going to get started with some logistics before we get into today's content, just like usual. So, Terry, if you will Vanna White for us, I would definitely appreciate that. So, first up, just like always, we are going to have all of our lines muted. However, we love the interaction from our audience, so please post any of your questions here, either in the GoToWebinar chat, or you can put them on our Trailblazer community group listed here. We are recording the session, and we'll post that to our YouTube channel after it's done rendering. And of course, we invite you to follow us on your preferred social media site. You can see all of our handles down below. All right, so this year, Automation Hour has gone boot camp. We are helping everybody with this transition to Flow learn about Flow and how to build them. So here is a great schedule of our sessions for the first half of the year. And this will be continuing throughout the second half of the year as well. And so we'll flip the slide and you'll be able to see the upcoming sessions we have for the second half of the year as well. And as always, you can register for as few or as many of the sessions as you like by going to automationhour.com/upcoming webinars. All right, so we cannot bring this to you without our amazing sponsors. So we want to make sure we give them a great big shout out. First up, Concrete.io has been with us since 2016 when we started this. Math is hard. So we want to say a huge thank you to them for being our sponsor since the very beginning. And also, we've got two newer sponsors that have joined us recently. Sumo Scheduler. I actually had the pleasure of meeting several people from their team, the New York World Tour last night. So that's been fantastic. We want to say thank you to them. And of course, last but not least, we want to say thank you to Active Campaign. So they have also been a wonderful sponsor of ours. So yes, co-host for Automation Hour, you've got me today, Michelle Hansen, along with Rakesh Gupta. But we know you're not here to see us. You're here for the good stuff. And for that, we're going to turn it over to today's amazing guest presenter, MVP and community group leader, Terry Miller. Terry, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good name. I like it. All right. Very good.
If you put Terry and Miller together, apparently I get Taylor. So, Terry,
why not? Why not?
It's all you.
Good. Thank you very much. And hopefully you're able to see the slides and everything and hear me just fine. But as Michelle said, I am Terry Miller. I am frequently known as Terry's Tidbits. And when I'm out and about, more people recognize that Terry's Tidbits than they do my actual name. So if you're a fan of Terry's Tidbits, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I am a Salesforce MVP, and I love the process of mentoring and teaching others. And I have the privilege of doing that in all the different ways that you see there listed on the screen. If you are interested in my contact information, that QR code up at the top of the screen will get you my contact information. I'll have that again on a later slide toward the end. I am known to talk to stuffed animals, the very last bullet point on that slide. If you slide out there to youtube.com, not now, but after we're done, if you go out to youtube.com/Terry's Tidbits, you'll find all my contents and probably see me have a few conversations with Einstein. Now that that's out of the way, let's actually transition to our topic for today. And transitions, at least for me, can sometimes be, well, they can cause a little bit of stress, sometimes a little bit of anxiety, and maybe even a little bit of frustration. You see, I can get caught in the routine of doing what's comfortable, and then it happens. You know, it's that moment when what was is no longer and what is our new reality. And for a moment, I'm forced out of my comfort zone and into that place that can sometimes feel a little bit foreign. And I can feel lost and maybe even a little bit discouraged. Now, let me give you an example that perhaps you can relate to. And I know I can't see any of you. I'm going to imagine that you are all participating along here with me today. But do you remember the first time you bought a new car, or maybe it was at least a new to you car, and you got in that car and it was dark outside, it was nighttime, and you were fumbling around the dash trying to figure out where's the light switches to turn on the lights so I can drive safely with my new car. Or perhaps you were stuck in a rainstorm and you're looking for the windshield wipers and they just weren't where you expected them to be. Things were different. Things were a little bit uncomfortable. Now, I had this same experience. For years, I would drive a Lexus sedan. I've had multiple Lexus sedans. I love them. They are comfortable. But I also like woodworking. I shouldn't say like, I love woodworking. I like making cabinets and things like that. Now, my Lexus, as comfortable as it was, it didn't do wood well. And so I was forced to kind of make a transition from what was comfortable to something that supported what I liked. Now, my new vehicle is this beast of a machine, and I love my truck. I can do things with my truck that I could never do with my Lexus. I can carry things like wood that I could never carry with my car. I can go places that the car really didn't want to travel. I am even big enough when I'm in my truck to block the view of everyone behind me. I can be that guy. Now, the thing is that the truck is very different from the sedan. I've learned that with my truck, it's so different that when you go to park the thing, I understand now why you see trucks often back into a parking spot. It's because that big machine, it's easier if you're backing it up into that tiny little spot. It is very different. Now, you might be looking at me and saying, hey, Terry, well, that's a lovely story, but I came here to learn flow. So what's that have to do with flow? And I would tell you this, it has a lot to do with flow because we have been experiencing the same transition as we have moved out of workflow rules and process builder and now into flow. We love process builder. It was so comfortable with the little true and the false path, and it made sense to us. And then flow comes along with all of its capabilities, and we can sometimes be a little bit confused as we jump into that environment. So that's what we're here to kind of talk about. And I've had the privilege of talking to a lot of admins across the globe, and a lot of times I will hear things like, Terry, flow is hard, flow is intimidating. I get into that big wide open space and I don't know what to do. I am not a developer, and this feels an awful lot like developer-y things. Now, if that's you, then I'm glad you're here. I hope that you'll leave today with a few ideas or some tricks and maybe some ways of kind of looking at flow and helping you as you transition from that comfort zone that we've had for so long and into the new reality and all of the fun stuff that we can do with flow. So let me introduce first what our use case is for today. And we are going to talk with our business, or I should say our business development team leader has come to us and they've said, hey, Terry, we would like you to create a round robin process with our leads. And if you're not familiar with round robin, what that is that when a record comes in as a lead object, it'll get assigned to a person. And then the next person in line will get the next lead, and the person after that gets the lead after that. And it just kind of circles. It goes around every team member until it gets to the end, and then it starts that circle all over again. So that's what round robin looks like, and we're going to build that out as a lead. Now, let's take a quick look at what that's going to look like. And normally, when I do presentations, I like to actually build out the presentation as we do it. In this particular case, it's a little bit more involved, and I didn't think I could probably pull it off in the amount of time that we had. So we're going to actually look at the actual pre-built flow that I've got for you today. But let me explain how the round robin is structured. We have two objects in Salesforce. One is called the round robin queue, And then it simply has a name, and we've got the ability to flag that queue as being active. It also has as a child object the people who are a part of that round robin queue. In this case, I'm in a dev org. I've only got the ability to have 2 people. And so in reality, you'd probably have a lot more people in a round robin than just 2, but play along with me. We've got 2 users in our round robin queue. And the first user will get the first record that comes in. The second record will end up going to the second person on our list. When we get to the final item, it just starts back over at the beginning. Now, if I go over and look at my lead, right now, Clarissa is the owner of this lead. You'll see that I've got 3 checkboxes on the screen. One of them just simply says that this round robin assignment, or this particular lead, was assigned to Clarissa based on the round robin assignment rules. I can also force the record back through the round robin process. I can also bypass it if I need to bypass it. So when a new record comes in, I don't want it to go through round robin, I can simply check that box and it will not run through that process. So let me demonstrate this for you. I'm going to check the box to force an update. And if I get my screen to go back smaller, I will see a save button. Now, I think Clarissa is actually, oh, she wasn't. I was thinking Clarissa was actually next in line, so I thought it might go right back to her. But you can see that the lead owner did automatically update to me. If I check it again, it should jump back to Clarissa and so forth. So it just continues to loop through. And every record that would come into as a lead, it would do the same thing. So it just rotates right through my people. That's what round robin does. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, the first thing that I want to help us understand as we dive a little bit deeper now into our flow, the first concept is simply one of language. And I want us to understand the difference between resources and elements. Whenever you're doing something new, I think it's important to just kind of get a level set to make sure we're all talking about the same things, we're on the same page. Resources are things that are created that we then use within our flow. Resources are created and then used. Elements are things that are configured to do stuff for us. Elements are configured to do stuff for us. And a lot of times those elements, well, Salesforce creates a lot of elements for us that we then configure. But you could also have a developer who might come in and actually create some elements for you as well that you could also leverage within your flow. So you're configuring something to do something else for you. Let me show you what I mean. So back on our flow, elements are the items that you see shown on our canvas. And you might say, well, Terry, what's the canvas? Well, the canvas is the big white open space that I often will refer to when I'm teaching people. It's the white canvas that you're putting things on. And your elements will all live on that canvas. Everything you see on my screen right now is an element. Now, if I come over to the side panel and I open up my toolbox, I can see that I have resources or things that I have created that I can use within my flow. These are resources. Now your canvas, if I jump back just a little bit, your canvas comes in 2 different styles. One is the auto layout, the other is the freeform. If you are new to flow, you might as well stick to auto layout. And the reason I say that is auto layout is just a little bit more intuitive. It's a little easier to follow. And besides, it doesn't create all of these weird lines and things that just kind of scatter all over your page. It has an actual format that is a little bit more intuitive to kind of follow through and see what your flow is doing. So again, if you're new, I would recommend that you stick with the auto layout. Now, before I jump into the next thing that I want to teach you, I want to ask you a couple questions. And I know, again, I'm not going to see your response, but I'm going to trust that you know the answer and that it's what I think it's going to be. But how many of you have a dresser in your bedroom at home? I suspect if I could see you, all of our hands would be up in the air, and we would probably be saying, yes, Terry, I have a dresser in my bedroom at home. Does your dresser have drawers in it? And I suspect it probably does, and everybody's hands would be up saying, yes, Terry, my dresser has drawers in it. I don't know why we're talking about my drawers, but okay. Well, let me ask you this. Do you put stuff in those drawers? And you're by now, please don't leave me. Just hang on for just a moment. But you probably put stuff in those drawers. Well, just so you know, I have a dresser in my bedroom, and it does have drawers in it. And one of those drawers is a socks drawer. And I have these lovely trailhead socks that, it's just not my thing. I don't wear things like this, but they go into my socks drawer. The cool thing is that anytime I need these socks, all I have to do is go to that drawer, my socks drawer, and there they are, right where I put them. Now, if I could go a little bit deeper here, I also have a pants drawer. My pants, they go in the pants drawer. Socks, they don't go in the pants drawer. That'd just be wrong. I have a shirts drawer, and shirts go in the shirts drawer. Pants in the pants drawer, socks in the socks drawer. Variables in Salesforce are simply drawers. They are a temporary place to store stuff until we need them. And just like our drawers, they have a type. And that type might be a variable that is a text variable. And if it's a text variable, that means I can only put text in that variable. If it's a date variable, then I can only put a date in that variable. It looks something like this. Let's create a new variable. And a variable is a resource. It's something that I'm creating, as opposed to something that I configured that somebody else created. And my variable is listed right here as a type of resource. In that variable, I get to give it a name and I get to choose the type. Remember, socks go in the socks drawer. If it's text, then I need to define that drawer as text. I have all of these different options that I can use to define what type of information or what goes into my variable. Now, the one on this list that I really like the most is simply this record one. And the reason I like the record is I can choose which object I want to have that record represent. So if I wanted it to be an account record, I can simply go and look for the account object. And now all of my account fields will be are associated to that variable. Those are really, really cool to be able to use that particular item. I'm going to come back to this multiple thing called collections in just a little bit. But that is your variables. Now, since I'm here on the flow, I want to kind of walk you through at a high level what our flow actually does for this round robin. And I want to start off with the record, the start element. And I'm going to click on that start element. And you'll see that it starts off of the lead object. It is a record trigger flow. This is part 2 of the record trigger flow training that you've had. And if you didn't see part 1, please go back and watch part 1. You'll find it out on their YouTube channel that was shown earlier. So record trigger flows run when you save a record. And in this case, it's associated to lead object. So when a lead record is created or saved, in my case, I've got it set to where it's created or updated. So it's going to run in either of these contexts. So if it's a brand new record, it's going to run on get create. It's also going to run when it is updated. And I have it optimized specifically for actions and related records. Now I can jump in here and change that if I wanted to. This is actually what it would look like if you created a new start element. You would come in and you'd get to choose that context in which it runs. That's similar to the little square box that we had in Process Builder, the very top box where you could say run this when a record's created or when it's created and updated. We get more options here in Flow. There's always more in Flow, by the way. There's always more in Flow than what you had in Process Builder. It can do so much more, even if we get out of our comfort zone. So we also have entry criteria, which was also covered in part 1 of this series. And then you have fast field updates and actions and related records. I wanted to just briefly cover this. There's a whole lot more to understand here, but my definition of how you decide when to use fast field updates or actions and related records is simply this. If I am updating a field on the object that triggered my flow, in other words, the record I'm saving, if I'm updating a field on the record I'm saving, I am going to use a fast field update almost all the time. Anything else that I might be doing, it is going to be an actions and related record. Let me say it again so that it sinks in. If I'm updating a field on the object that triggered the flow, I'm going to use a fast field update. Anything else, well, let me back up, almost all the time. Anything else is going to be an actions and related records. That is my start element. Now I'm going to come through here and I'm going to first determine, do I need to run the round robin? That's that first decision there. Assuming that I do need to run it, I'm going to go get the queue that it's the object in essence that it's related to. It's going to be leads in this case. I'm going to make another decision that says, yep, I found my queue, it's active, everything looks happy. And then I'm going to go get the people who are associated to that queue. And then I'm going to loop through those people to find out who is next in line. I'm going to assign the record, and then I am going to update the queue so that the queue knows that I successfully assigned it to the next person in line. It now knows who to go to after that. And I'm going to update the lead record. At the end, I send the person an email saying, hey, you got a new lead. Congratulations, thanks for playing. So that's high level, that's the structure of our flow. So the first piece here that we need to then look at next is going to be decisions. Decisions tell us which way to go. And if you think about your old process builders, it was the blue diamond that had the true path and the false path that would come out of it. And if the criteria that you had defined in the diamond was true, you'd go the true path. If it didn't, it dropped down through the false path. Decisions in flow are very similar, but again, it takes it another step further because it's flow and it can. And decisions give us the ability to go multiple different directions. We're not limited now to just true and false. It's almost as if you're pulling up to an intersection and you've got the ability to either turn right, you could go forward, you could go left, and sometimes there's even more options than that when we come up to an intersection. So I think about decisions simply as a traffic cop. We pull up to the intersection and it's telling us which way do we want to go. The traffic cop is pointing us in that direction. Inside my flow, my first decision is simply saying, do I need to execute the round robin? And so it has two options. I can go down the round robin path or I can skip it altogether. I'm going to edit that decision by double clicking on it. You'll see that I have a name for that decision. And then I've got a name for my first outcome that simply says run round robin. And then I have my criteria that is set to determine if I go down that round robin path or if I'm going to jump over to the next item in my list and skip it. Now you might be looking at this screen and you say, whoa, dollar record, what's dollar record? Well, I'm glad you asked. Dollar record is your friend. I always say dollar record is your friend, and it's your friend because it represents the record that triggered the flow. I'm coming into a lead record. I'm hitting save. That lead record that I'm saving becomes my dollar record. And when I click into dollar record, I will see all of the fields that are a part of that lead object. And that includes that round robin assigned, the bypass round robin. So do I need to assign it? If it's not already checked, it's false. That means I do want to run down that path as long as it's not flagged to bypass. So brand new record, this would be false. This is going to hopefully also be false. It would force it down through the round robin path. My third option, you can see this is a 1 and 2 or 3. My third option is what I demoed earlier, where I just said, hey, I want it to reprocess round robin. I'm forcing it into that path, and that equals true. As long as one of those options in that conditional logic is true, it will go down the round robin path. If it isn't true, it's going to jump down to the next item, and in this case, it will just skip. Now you say, well, Terry, you said that it could go multiple directions. How do I do that? Well, I'm glad you asked that, because there's this little plus sign here that I can simply click, and I can add new outcomes. And so I could come up to my street corner, and now I've got my round robin path I could go down. I've got this other path, this one, and this one, and this one. And then if it's none of those, it will skip and go down the default option. Those are called decisions. They're elements that we are configuring to help guide the direction that we are going to go within our flow. Now, next here, we are going to query some data, and you might, whoa, Terry, you just said query. I think, Terry, you forgot I'm not a developer. Yeah, you're right. I kind of did forget that perhaps, but admin out there, let me ask you this. Well, if I were to come up to you and say, I need a list view created, would you, admin, be able to do that for me? Could you create a list view if I asked you to? I suspect you probably could. And if you can create a list view for me, I will make the case that you're going to be able to use the get element that Salesforce has created to allow you to query data. The term query doesn't have to freak us out. It's really just a list view that we're defining. Let me show you what I mean. We're back in our flow, and we're assuming we're going to go down this round robin. I tried to say that fast multiple times. Run round robin, and the next thing I need to do is I need to go out and find that queue to see, is it active? I also kind of need its ID number. So that's really the big reason I'm running it. I'm going to choose the get element, and in this case, I'm going to edit it. It's got its name up there at the top. The object that I am querying, so this is the tab that you're going to create a list view from. It's the object that I'm going to query data from. It's the round robin queue. The conditions are simply where the name equals lead. That looks an awful lot like what you would do if you were creating a list view, right? Name equals leads, and active equals true. That's almost all there is to querying data. It's not that different than what you would do creating a list view. Now, I also have the ability to set the sort order. Again, it's flow, it's always more. I can sort this the way that I want to. And then I come down here to these last two options. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about these options. So the first one here is how many records do we want to store? And we have the option of storing the first record only, or we can store all records. Now, I happen to bring with me my deck of cards, and hopefully you can see that I have my deck of cards here on my desk, as well as see my face. So I want to use my deck of cards to help explain a concept to you. And this deck of cards is going to represent my Salesforce org. And I have records in my Salesforce org. Then each of those records would be represented by a card. So in this case, I have a 7 diamond, and that would be a record in Salesforce. One record. If I bring another one out there, I've got the 5 of hearts. That's another record in Salesforce. Now, if I look at this big pile of records and I spread that across my table, you can see that there's a lot of cards in this deck. This is what Salesforce is referring to as a collection. A collection is simply more than one. One record, a collection of records. So when I jump back over here and I look at how many records do I want to store, if I choose just the first record, it's going to create or store this as a variable that is just one item in that variable. One record, just like it says. The concept here of all records, if I choose that, it's going to pull back every record that meets the criteria that we defined above, and it's going to store that in a variable that will be considered a collection of data because it has more than one. That's how many records to store. The next section here is how to store the records data. It is going to store it in a variable, but we get to choose how that gets structured. Now, if you are new to Flow, I would tell you this, just choose the default option while you're learning Flow, automatically store all fields. The reason I say that is Salesforce will do all of the heavy lifting for you. You don't have to think about much when you go with that particular option. Now, if you want to graduate up a little bit, you might say choose the fields. You may want to choose the fields that you want to have Salesforce bring back. And then it opens up this section to allow you to choose those fields. Now you might say, well, Terry, why would I want to do that if Salesforce can do it for me all automatically? And Terry would tell you it's because he's worked with a lot of customers and he's seen a lot of things that kind of like make him scratch his head. And he will say, you know, what if you had like a lead object with 300 fields in it? And all you really needed in your flow was the ID and the status. Why would you ever want to bring back all 300 fields into your flow if all you needed was the status field? Option 2 allows you to make that decision. Now, option 3, this is the one that I often will use. It's what I consider the control freak option. It gives you the ability to not only choose the fields you want, but you get to name the fields, put them in a variable, a separate variable per field if you wanted to. You also get to name the actual collection. I like being able to name my collection because I'm kind of a naming freak geek. It's kind of my soapbox, and you'll notice that as I go through my flow that there's a specific naming convention that I use and how I define my variables. That's on purpose. If you don't have a naming convention that you like, you can go out to my terrystidbits.com. I do have my naming convention out there that I use. Let me try to say this as kind as I can. If you ever have to inherit a flow from somebody and it's maybe a little bit larger flow, there's a lot of elements and so forth on it, and it doesn't have a naming convention, it can be really, really difficult to find what you're looking for without digging through every element on that flow to figure out what's going on. And so a naming convention, if you're consistent with it, I could type in something like, show me all of the account name. If I'm using that as a variable, I need account name. I could type that in and it would bring back every place that I'm using that specific variable type. And it can save me a lot of time in the process. So anyway, off my soapbox, we'll get back to something that y'all like, which is simply getting this back to simple, which is our automated let Salesforce do everything for us. All right. We're going to go back now to my deck of cards. And the reason that I want to go back here is before I introduce the next topic, I want to introduce or play a little game with you. And we're going to play the game of Slapjack. And if you're not familiar with the game of Slapjack, it's really quite simple. I'm going to pretend that I've got 4 players. And normally you would deal out the cards one at a time so everybody gets the right thing. I don't have the time to do that today in our presentation. So I'm just going to give all 4 players a grouping of cards, and they're going to trust that I didn't cheat. So I've got 4 players playing the game of Slapjack, and the game of Slapjack, what you do is the first player will turn over a card and place it in the middle of all 4 players. And if that card is a jack, then the first player that slaps their hands on that pile of cards gets to keep the cards in that pile. The goal is to be the player that has cards at the end of the game. You're going to slowly lose your cards as you play this game, and the one that has all of the cards is the winner. So the thing that's cool about the game of Slapjack is that right now that king is the card that matters. I'm looking for a jack, but that king is the one that's face up. It's the card that matters. Now when player 2 puts his number 5 hearts down there, his card now becomes the card that matters. This king doesn't matter anymore. He's done. My third player is going to come in, and right there, I got the jack right away. So the first person that slaps that, they get to keep those cards. Now, the thing I like about this game, and that I don't want you to miss, is the only card that matters is the card that is face up. And so as I navigate around, every time I put a new card up on top, that is the card that matters. Loops. Loops are simply a game of Slapjack. You can say, well, I don't remember seeing cards in my in loops, but okay, Terry, just hang on with me and I'll help you understand why I say that is the case. So I'm going to assume now we've got another decision. We've also got another get here where we have pulled some data, and then we have our loop. Our loop, like the game of Slapjack, let's just say it's going to be a collection. So I've got a collection of cards, more than one. And when I come into that loop, it's just the same as if when I take my card and I put it face up in the middle of my game, Slapjack. When I enter in to this loop, let me slide this over, you can see it better. When I enter into this loop, Salesforce is going to take that card that is face up and it's going to name that card current item in loop. That's going to be its variable name, current item in loop. In this case, it's the 10. This card is going to navigate through that loop, and it's going to come all the way back up and back to my loop element. And once it hits that, it's going to discard it, and my next card is going to be face up. Previous card, that 10 no longer matters. It's now the 5. That 5 is going to navigate through the loop, do whatever it needs to do within that loop. It's going to be called current item in loop. It's going to work its way through. It's going to come back up to the top into that loop, and it's going to be discarded. And my next card is going to do the same. Current item in loop. It's going to do that through every record that's in my collection until it gets to the last one. And this last card, it's going to also navigate through the loop, But the difference is when it comes up here to the end, it is going to be discarded. But then I have no more records in my hand. It's empty. I have no more records to loop through. So then it's going to just navigate through this after last pass and come down to the next item in the flow. Loops are simply a game of slapjack. The only card that matters is the one that is face up, and it's called current item in loop.
Hey Terry, before you continue, we had a question come in that I think would be great to answer now.
Okay.
So Sita has asked, what is the purpose of the variable as record instead of text, number, or pick list?
Repeat that one more time for me.
What is the purpose of the variable as record instead of text, number, pick list?
Test number pick list.
Text, number,
Text.
or pick list. So what's the purpose of the variable type of record, I think is the question.
The data type, let me jump back over here and let's see if I can follow along with what you're asking. So when I'm defining that resource, that variable, and I have the data type here, I think this maybe, and tell me, Michelle, if you think I'm off track, but I think what you're asking me is what's the difference between these different data types? And this kind of gets me back to my socks drawer analogy. I have a socks drawer, I have a pants drawer, and I have a shirts drawer, and I can only put those items into those specific drawers. When I define a variable and it's a number variable, then the only thing I can put in that variable is a number. I can't put a text value in a number variable. I can't put a date there. Salesforce is going to look at me and say, that doesn't fit. It doesn't belong. So when you're defining your variable, it does need to be defined with a specific type. And that allows you to store that type of information then in that variable. Is that, hopefully that gets us close to what you're asking?
I think so. And I think the important part is just with record, Salesforce is smart enough to understand what an object actually looks like and store all of the fields on that object in a single variable that is a record of that object type. And that's where
Yes.
a record comes in. It's something that's kind of specific to Salesforce in this and how we use things in Salesforce as opposed to any other programming language. Sita, if you're out there, if that answers the question, let us know. If not, please put in any follow-up information so we can get that question answered for you.
Yeah.
But Terry, for now, I think we can keep going.
Okay, very good. The last piece here that I want to talk about, it's not the last, I've got two more, is assignments, is when you create a variable, which also kind of fits what we were just talking about, when you create a brand new variable, it doesn't have a value unless you do have the ability to define a default value. But if you don't do that, it's what we call null. It will be an empty placeholder. It's like having a dresser drawer with nothing in it. You can't call it a socks drawer until you put something in it. Variables are kind of the same way. I think of them as kind of having a little bit of an identity crisis until you put something in them. Assignments give you the ability to give that variable a value. And so it's like putting the socks in the socks drawer. It now has a value or something in it that we can then use. So if I look back over here, I have an assignment here inside of the loop. And this assignment is simply saying my variable that's called assigned user, that is going to be who's going to become my record owner that's being assigned through this round robin. I'm going to set that variable equal to current item in loop. There's my card that's face up. I'm going to set it to the user field that's navigating through my flow. And remember, that is the round robin assignment. So these two items Terry and Clarissa, that's who's navigating through that loop. Those are the two records I have. The first one that's face up is what's going to then be assigned, or this user field is what's going to be assigned to that variable. So I'm assigning the ID to variable assigned user. The other variable that I'm assigning is the last order number. And I didn't spend a lot of time talking about last order number, but it's also current item in loop, but it's the order in which I am in the process of my assignment. So I am, in this case, I would be a number 1, Clarissa would be a number 2. And we take that information and we're going to store it up here to know who got the assignment the last time we went through. So those are my two variables that I'm assigning, and it's simply just giving them a value. All right. Now, updates is the final option that I want to talk through. And updates is just simply saying, don't lose me, don't forget. Remember I said variables, they are a temporary storage. If you don't save the records that you're working on within the flow, you're going to lose it. And so it's kind of like pushing the save button, although technically you're in the process of hitting save, but like hitting save with inside of your flow is the update. So let's take a quick look at what that looks like. I've got two updates. The first one that I'm going to update is the round robin queue. And this is simply going to set the last order number on the round robin queue. It's going to change this number right here to whoever it was that I last assigned a record to. That's important to me because I want to be able to go to the next person in line. And if it's not the next person in line, it would restart back over at 1 and it would assign it, in this case, to myself. The next lead that comes in would get assigned to me. The second update that I have is to the actual lead record. And I'm updating the lead that is the lead that I am currently working with. It's $record lead ID. Now you might be thinking, well, Terry, you told me that when we choose a fast field update or an actions and related, that if I'm updating a field on the object that triggered my flow, I should use a fast field update. And then I said almost all the time. The reason for that is there are some things that we're doing within this flow that I can't do in a before trigger. And so I am forced to have to do this as an after. And one of those is the element where I'm wanting to send out that email. But I'm forced to do what I would normally try to do in a fast field update. I have to do it in a actions and related just because it's not an option in the fast field update side. So that's the almost piece of my earlier statement. But I'm setting the force roundup or force the roundup assignment, round robin assignment to false. So I'm resetting the checkbox if it was true. I'm also setting the owner now to my variable that was the assigned user ID. And I'm setting the round robin assignment to true. And when that runs, that updates that record. And with that, we have gone through all of the items that I wanted to kind of walk you through here today. So hopefully you find that helpful. And if you have questions, please do put those in the chat. Michelle, I'll let you kind of monitor that and toss those out at me if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one we have up is from Joshua. He asked, can you use order number to decide if you divide the loop iteration if the value is even or odd? I'm not quite sure where the order number came from. So Joshua, if you have the ability to maybe clarify that.
It's this here.
You can absolutely put in like a loop counter variable that would just in your loop every time you could.
You'll find when I do teaching, there's times when I will put build it out specifically around the instruction that I'm trying to communicate. And often I will have really smart people in my sessions and they'll say, well, Terry, why didn't you just do this? Well, you could. I do a similar session like this where I count some records through a flow, and one of the things I also have to say, well, Terry, why didn't you just use a dashboard for that? Or and then I will say something like, well, it's because we're not here to learn about dashboards. We're here to learn about flow. And so you're absolutely right. There are other ways we could have accomplished this and done it more effectively than what this is. But I did design it this way to be able to teach a lesson. And so hopefully that helps explain that. You're absolutely right. We could do this differently. I think we could even do it without being in a loop.
Perfect. So on the subject of loops, Chrissy asked, this is the most basic of questions, but can you explain when you would want to use a loop element? I've read so many things, but embarrassingly, I just don't get it. And before you answer, Chrissy, I just want to let you know that loops are hard and complicated, and you are far from the only person who doesn't get it. But I guarantee you we can help you get across that particular hurdle today.
Yeah, I find that I actually am using loops fairly frequently. Now, I admittedly don't use it as often now today as what I did early on, primarily because we have a filtered collection filter option element now that we could use that kind of eliminates it. But the scenario is I'm looking for something specific a lot of times, or maybe, well, like in this particular case, I'm looking for who is my next person that I need to assign something to. And so I'm looping through my set of records or my set of cards to find that right record. I've got a project that I'm working on with a nonprofit right now that where I'm having to loop through we're doing a data migration, and I'm looping through a set of payment records to find the payment record that matches to the opportunity that we're working with. And the data was kind of convoluted, and it wasn't a direct in the original system. It wasn't well, this payment goes with this opportunity. I'm having to loop through all the payments looking for the payments that match certain criteria to then be able to make an educated guess that that's what the payment that belongs on that opportunity. You're going to find that there's a variety of different reasons for loops. It could be that you are updating. Well, here's an easy example. Let's say I have a record trigger flow on my contact object, and anytime the address changes on the account object, anytime the address changes on the account object, I want to update all of the addresses on my contacts. You could do that using a loop. You could also do that differently, but that might be a simple example. You could loop through those contacts and update those. That was a bad example because there's actually other ways to do that smarter. I think you're going to find that they're really the canvas can just be as wide open as whatever your need is, and it's you just have to think through the steps that you for the process that you're working with to know what is the best approach to do it. If you can avoid a loop, I encourage you, avoid loops. Loops are heavy processing elements within your flow, and you don't want to do it unless you have to. If there's a better way to do it, by all means, go at it.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, really, when I talk about loops and how you use loops, the key for me is that if you have multiple of something, and normally when we're in Salesforce, we're talking about records, but if you have multiple, let's call them records, that you need to be able to handle individually, that's when you need a loop. Because if you think about it in terms of the cards in Terry's hand, you cannot pick up a whole stack of cards and work with all, 10 of them at the same time.
Right.
I have to, if I'm looking for the card that's the 3, of hearts. I have to pick them up one by one and go, is this the 3 of hearts? Nope. Is this the 3 of hearts? Nope. Hey, look, that one's the 3 of hearts that he's got. And so that's where the loop comes in to play, is being able to take a stack and look through it one by one and either do something with it or not do something with it, whatever your use case really is.
Yeah.
So, all right, back to Joshua on the subject of loops. Is there a best way to avoid hitting governor limits with loops outside of record updates, outside of loops? And I think for sure that is the key, is any sort of DML you're doing, updates, creates, gets, don't do it in no pink in a loop.
No pink in loops. That's my motto. No pink in loops. And I don't care what color pink or what kind of pink it is. It's just no pink. None of those elements that we have that are pink should ever be found inside of a loop. Let me see if I can get back to what I'm referring to. If I add an element here inside this loop that has the color pink, if you ever do that and I'm near you, I'll slap your hands nicely and help you understand we don't ever put pink in loops. Now, the question is, how do you avoid the governor limits inside the loop? That's really tough without knowing specifically what you're running into, but I'll go back to what I said earlier. If I can avoid the loop, avoid the loop. And one way you could perhaps simplify what you're having to loop through is leverage a collection filter element. And if you can, like with my deck of cards, maybe I just need to identify the red cards, then I can filter down that original set of collection. Maybe it's my entire deck of cards. And so looping through the entire deck, I can use this filter to say only the red cards, and then use that as I enter into my loop. I'm not looking now at every card. I'm only looking at half of them now. And that could save you some of that processing. Good question.
Perfect. All right, so Tim actually wanted to say thank you. You did a great job of explaining the variables, the records, and the loops. So that was definitely something that I think resonated with everybody. I really like that you use the cards, just because I think it makes more sense to people when you put it in terms of something concrete they can see.
Yeah.
So that always for me is a big deal, because like everything that we do in Salesforce is so kind of obscure. It's all theoretical. It's this database thing. But as soon as you throw something out in front of my face that I can see and I can watch you like shuffle through those cards, I'm like, oh, I get it now.
Yes.
And I think we've met our goal. Chrissy came back and said, this is the sound of me starting to understand loops. That payment analogy was perfect. So
fantastic. Very good.
Awesome. All right, let me pop over to Trailblazer Community and do one last check for questions over there. But usually we've got a great conversation going here in our GoToWebinar chat. So thanks as always. And Terry, I think we have managed to exhaust the audience of questions today.
All right, good. Either that meant we answered them all as we went, or they all left. I don't know, whichever. But yeah, thank you, everybody. I do appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to me rattle through some of this stuff. It's a lot of fun for me to do it, and so thank you so much. I do have a lot of resources on terrystidbits.com and my YouTube channel as well if you are looking for some additional help there. So feel free to leverage those.
Absolutely, and I just threw the link to that in chat as well. Terry, thank you again for coming back to Automation Hour yet again to be a presenter, for helping our audience learn how to conquer their fear of flows, and we are all one step closer to becoming Flownetics.
Isn't that sweet? I love it. You're very welcome.
All right, well, we'll see you all in the next episode. Hope you all have a great rest of your day. We'll talk soon.